Imagine a boat a little over 5 meters long. Its hull is cobbled together from planks that used to be part of a sunken ship. The seams are caulked with a mixture that includes seal blubber, clay, and blood. This is not a ship. This is hope, taking the form of wood and nails. And now imagine that this boat is being launched in one of the most brutal corners of the world ocean. South of the 50th degree of latitude begins the zone sailors call the Roaring Forties and the Furious 50s. Here the wind picks up speed, circling the globe without a single piece of land to stop it. Waves don't roll. They crash down like avalanches of water and foam. In this boat are 3 men. Their bodies are emaciated from 19 months of survival on a desert island. Their skin is covered in sores from constant dampness, their hands scarred from work. They know that if the boat capsizes, and any sane person would say it should capsize, the cold water will kill them in a matter of minutes. The ocean temperature is close to freezing. The heart will simply stop from shock. But they have no choice. They have already died to the civilized world. They were declared missing more than a year ago. No one is looking for them. No one knows where they are. To stay on the island means to slowly fade away. To go into the ocean means risking everything for a chance that exists only in their heads. This is not just a story about a shipwreck. This is a story about how 5 men turned a bare rock into an industrial base, how they built a forge out of nothing, how they created a society where chaos should have reigned, and how, in the end, 3 of them got into a homemade boat and crossed 300 miles of open ocean where most ships sink without a trace. This is the story of the crew of the schooner Grafton, and it proves that the human mind is a tool capable of defeating even nature when everything else is already lost. December 1863. Sydney. In Sydney Harbour, a schooner sits at the dock. 80 tons displacement, 2 masts, a hull designed for coastal trade. This is the Grafton, an unremarkable vessel that in a few months will become a tomb for its crew. Captain Thomas Musgrave oversees the loading of provisions. He is 42 years old. He was born in America but has spent his life at sea. Over 20-plus years of sailing, he realized one thing. In the ocean, it is not the strongest who survive, but the most organized. Musgrave keeps records. He makes lists. He records every detail, course, speed, distance, weather. His crew considers this tedious. Later, it is these records that will save them from madness. Coming aboard is François Reynal, a Frenchman, engineer, 31 years old. Thin, not very healthy, looking nothing like a sailor. The crew looks at him with distrust. What will this intellectual do on an expedition to the end of the world? But Musgrave quickly realizes that Reynal is a rare type of man. He knows how to not only think, but also work with his hands until they bleed. The other 3 are Alexander McLaren, 35, a Scot, the captain's mate. Calm, reliable, capable of enduring hardship without unnecessary drama. George Harris, 25, Portuguese, a strong and skilled hunter. And Henry Forges, 28, Norwegian, quiet but technically gifted. A small crew, but this is exactly what will save them. Fewer mouths to feed, fewer egos to keep in check, less chance the group will fall apart when the difficulties begin. The goal of the expedition is Tin, the Auckland Islands, lost 300 miles south of New Zealand, are rumored to be rich in minerals. There are investors ready to believe these rumors and invest money. There are sailors ready to risk their lives for this money. It is a classic story of human greed lulling the instinct for self-preservation. The Grafton leaves Sydney and sets a course south. Gradually the temperature drops, the water darkens, the sky becomes heavy and gray. By the end of December they reach the Auckland Islands, a group of volcanic rocks covered in impenetrable scrub, where the wind howls like a turbine and the ocean beats against the shore with the power of an industrial press. Musgrave looks for shelter and finds a bay that looks safe. Today this place is called Carnley Harbour, but names don't matter when the ocean begins to decide your fate. January 3rd, 1864, midnight. The storm hits suddenly, like a punch. The wind intensifies in minutes. The anchor doesn't hold, the bottom of the harbor is smooth stone, and the metal simply slides over it. Musgrave feels the ship shifting even before he hears the screech of the chain. 5 men fight the wind and waves all night. They shout commands they cannot hear. They pull wet, icy ropes with numb hands. They try to re-anchor, but nature is stronger. Before dawn, a sound rings out that every sailor fears hearing more than anything in the world. The crack of wood on rock. The hull is breached. Water rushes in, black, freezing, unstoppable. "Abandon ship," screams Musgrave. They have minutes, maybe seconds. They grab everything they can carry, a compass, a sextant, a watch, a gun with a small supply of ammunition, canvas, tools, a little food. They jump into the dinghy and row to shore through the icy surf. Looking back, they see the waves smashing the Grafton against the rocks. The masts snap. The hull breaks apart. Within an hour, the vessel turns into wooden debris that the waves scatter along the shore. They are alive. But standing on this desolate beach in the rain, they realize the main thing. They are 300 miles from the nearest human being. No one knows they are here. No one is coming. They are trapped. The first days on the island. The Auckland Islands are not a tropical paradise. It is cold here, even in summer. It rains 300 days a year. The ground is a swamp of mud and water. The wind never stops completely. Dense thickets cover the slopes. Cliffs drop straight into the ocean, which beats against the shore with constant blunt force. Ships rarely approach these islands, and those that do don't linger. Rescue here is not just unlikely. It is a fantasy that can be nurtured only because the alternative is too terrifying to accept. They spend the first night under canvas. The wind tries to tear away their shelter. The men don't sleep. They fall into short lapses of oblivion between fits of shivering. They listen to the trees groaning under the pressure of the wind. At dawn, Musgrave gathers everyone. He speaks simply, without ceremony. Their situation is serious but not hopeless. They can wait for rescue and, most likely, die. Or they can build a life, however rough, primitive, until rescue comes. Or until they organize their own rescue. The difference is important. Waiting is passive. It corrodes the will. Building, even ineptly, creates momentum. It gives a reason to wake up in the morning. From the first week, Musgrave introduces a regime. He remains captain but does not rule through humiliation or threats. Decisions are discussed. Tasks are distributed by skills. They eat together. They keep a calendar. Sundays are observed not because the island cares about their religion, but because ritual is a bulwark against chaos. They demand cleanliness of themselves. Disputes are resolved openly. These choices may seem small, but in conditions of isolation, small choices become load-bearing beams. When people stop washing, stop counting days, stop gathering around a common fire, They don't just become dirtier. They begin to dissolve. They explore the bay and find what they need: fresh water from a stream, timber from the forest, seals on the shore. Seals are critical. They are food, fat, skins, sinew. Harris demonstrates his value in hunting. The others learn quickly. Killing a male fur seal is not elegant work. The animal is huge and surprisingly tenacious. But they are hungry, and hunger sharpens consciousness. They begin rendering fat for oil, smoking meat, preserving skins. Reynal, with a technician's instinct, looks at the seal not as food, but as a warehouse of materials. Musgrave insists on building a real house. Not a tent, not a lean-to, a structure that will withstand winter. Using salvaged tools and sheer stubbornness, they fell trees, drag logs, split planks, and build a cabin next to the stream. They call it epigwait, a word Musgrave once encountered and remembered as meaning a shelter, more an idea than a place. They build a stone hearth, arrange sleeping platforms. The cabin is not comfortable in the modern sense, but it is dry, and dryness in this climate is a luxury. A forge in hell. Then they begin to build industry. This is where Reynal's story changes everything. Most shipwreck stories end with people clinging to bare survival, eating whatever, sleeping whenever, huddled around the hope that one day a sail will appear. The crew of the Grafton does something different. They start manufacturing, using stone, clay, and a stubborn understanding of physics. Reynal builds a primitive forge. He makes bellows from seal skin stretched over a wooden frame. He manufactures valves from scraps of metal. It isn't pretty, but it works. With heat comes repair. With repair, improvement. They sharpen tools. They forge new fasteners. They turn broken metal into useful forms. When they need light, they build lamps that burn on seal fat with wicks of moss. When they need soap, they mix rendered fat with alkaline ash. When they need waterproof clothing, they tan skins and sew them into garments that resist constant moisture. When Musgrave needs to keep a journal, because keeping a journal is another way to preserve sanity, they even make ink from what is at hand. As winter deepens, the island seems to tighten around them. Storms tear at the coast. Rain turns paths into mud. Darkness swallows the afternoon. But inside, epigwait, they remain functional. They fix the roof, maintain the fire, keep the regime. Depression comes in waves, ones that feel not like sadness, but like the disappearance of meaning. But they respond to it with discipline: work, conversation, shared meals, planned entertainment. Reynal gives informal lessons, explaining principles of mechanics and chemistry. Musgrave reads aloud from the little they have. They play games using dice. This is not entertainment. This is maintenance. It keeps the mind from turning inward and beginning to devour itself. Months pass. Not a single ship appears. The men begin to realize that rescue, if it comes, may come too late. And then an idea, which had probably been forming in their heads quietly, guiltily, like a forbidden thought, comes to the center of their lives. They will leave the island themselves. A crazy plan. They have the dinghy. As is, it is too small for the open ocean. But Reynal proposes a plan that is half madness, half genius. They will rebuild it into a larger vessel, cutting and lengthening the hull, strengthening the keel, adding a deck and shelter, equipping it with sails and a rudder strong enough to survive heavy seas. In a shipyard with proper tools, this would be ambitious. On an isolated island with improvised equipment, it is almost impossible. But the word impossible loses its power when the alternative is death. They start by making better tools. The forge becomes the heart of the project. Metal parts salvaged from wreckage, broken hinges, barrel hoops, anything that could be forged, turn into nails, spikes, clamps, and blades. With each new tool, their capabilities expand. They move the dinghy to a flat area next to the cabin and begin the delicate work of cutting and remodeling it. They lengthen the hull to about 17 feet. They build a new keel. They reinforce stress points. They test the seams. To caulk the seams, they use a mixture of seal fur and fat combined with resin extracted from local trees, pressing it into the joints until the boat begins to hold water, as it should. A storm almost ruined everything. Floodwater warped the wood and cracked a section of the hull. The men look at the damage, and for a moment, the project, 10 months of labor, seems to sag under the weight of the sea's indifference. McLaren speaks first, in the simple voice of a sailor who has realized that emotions are useless if they do not produce action. Then we start again. They fix, improve drainage around the work site, strengthen what broke, and keep moving forward. By mid-1865, their boat is almost finished. They call it Rescue, a name that carries both hope and a kind of challenge. It has a small deck and a tiny cabin to shed water. It has a mast and sail cut from salvaged canvas. It has rigging twisted from sinew and fibers treated with fat to resist water. It has ballast and reinforcement designed to help it recover when waves try to capsize it. It is still dangerously small, but it is real. Then arises the problem that every lifeboat plan faces: capacity. With supplies for an ocean crossing, Rescue cannot safely carry all 5. Someone must stay. The choice is made without melodrama. It is discussed, debated, and decided with the grim practicality their situation demands. Musgrave must go because he can navigate. Raynal must go because he understands the boat's construction and can fix what breaks. Forges must go because 3 men is the minimum needed to manage sail, rudder, and pumping in heavy seas. McLaren and Harris will stay at Epigwait and keep the place running until Rescue returns. Because Rescue, if it happens, must be organized by people who have reached civilization. July 19th, 1865. After 19 months on Auckland Island, they launch Rescue. Goodbyes between people who have survived together are rarely sentimental in the way outsiders imagine. It is quieter, a long handshake, a look that says more than words could say. Then Musgrave, Raynal, and Forges push off, and the boat slips into the gray. The first day offers deceptive mercy. Manageable seas, wind that allows them to test the rigging without immediate catastrophe. Then the weather turns, as it almost always does in these latitudes. Clouds descend, wind strengthens. The ocean begins to build, wave after wave, stacking into steep, punishing walls. By nightfall, they are in a full storm. Musgrave holds the tiller with a sailor's instinct for angle and timing, trying to keep the boat oriented so as not to trigger a capsize. Raynal and Forges pump water constantly. Their hands are raw, shoulders burning, as water lashes over the sides faster than they can pump it out. Sleep becomes a few minutes here and there, short lapses into exhaustion interrupted by the next wave. At one point, a larger wave hits them broadside, and the boat heels over hard. The mast groans. The sea pours in. For a moment, it seems inevitable that the ocean will finish what it started 18 months ago. Then the boat rights itself. The structure holds. Seams do not burst. The mast stays standing. They live. Navigation is a problem that gets worse with every hour. Under cloud cover, celestial observations are unreliable. Dead reckoning, estimating position based on course and speed, is compromised by wind, current, and the simple fact that small boats do not move through the sea with predictable efficiency. Musgrave aims for Stewart Island, the southern outpost of New Zealand, about 280 miles away. Miss it, and there is nothing but more ocean and the possibility of being swept into even higher latitudes, where cold becomes the killer. On the 5th day, conditions soften just enough to offer visibility. A rift opens in the gray, and Forges, scanning the horizon, sees something that doesn't move like a cloud. Land. The silhouette of Stewart Island rises low and dark. It is a sight that can make hardened men feel weak. They are not safe yet. Coastal waters are treacherous, and exhaustion makes simple decisions dangerous. But this sight means their crossing was not a meaningless march into oblivion. They reach shore on July 24th, 1865. Their clothes are stiff with salt, hands swollen and cracked. They are hollowed out by fatigue and cold, but they are alive. They find local Maori who feed them and offer shelter, and from there, Musgrave makes his way to the nearest European settlement. As soon as he can stand long enough to be heard, he begins the next task with the same stubborn discipline that got him through the island. He must go back. The return. In ports, sympathy is not the same as help. The Auckland Islands have a reputation as ship-eaters, and it is winter. Captains do not want to risk their vessels, their crews, and their livelihoods on a rescue mission that might fail. There is no official search and rescue apparatus. Humanitarian duty exists, but it often loses arguments to economics and fear. Musgrave pushes anyway. He argues, he begs, he promises. He insists that 2 men are alive on that island, and that he will not leave them to die after they trusted him to return. Eventually, he secures a schooner, the Flying Scud, and insists on serving as pilot. Raynal, still weakened from the crossing, contributes, giving Musgrave precise descriptions of Carnley Harbour's hazards and safe approaches. In early September 1865, less than 2 months after Rescue landed, the Flying Scud heads south. When they reach Auckland Island, fog and rough weather try to hide the coastline. But Musgrave has stared at this shore too long to be deceived. He guides the schooner into Carnley Harbour. As they round the final point to the cove where Epigwait stands, Musgrave raises a spyglass and scans the tree line. For a few seconds, nothing. Then 2 figures appear, small against the dark green scrub, running, waving, alive. McLaren and Harris had maintained the regime. They hunted seals, maintained the cabin, repaired storm damage as best they could, and kept a signal fire ready. But hope is a resource that runs out when not replenished. Weeks passed without a sail, without smoke, without a sign. They didn't know if Musgrave's boat reached New Zealand or vanished. They didn't know if rescue would come, or if the island had claimed their comrades as it claimed so many others. When the Flying Scud enters the bay, the relief is not dramatic. It is physical, like a weight lifted from the chest. All 5 leave the island together. Before departing, Musgrave collects what is important: his journal, the tools they made, evidence of what they built. The crew of the Flying Scud looks at Epigwait in disbelief. The cabin, the forge, the remnants of a small functioning world carved out of wet rock and relentless wind. It is proof that survival can be engineered, not just endured. After the return, in civilization their stories spread quickly, as happens with stories that contain something people want to believe about themselves. Musgrave publishes his journal. Reynal writes his own account, with technical details that make the achievement harder to dismiss as embellishment. Newspapers repeat the basics: shipwreck, 19 months on a subantarctic island, a forge and shipyard built from wreckage, a 17-foot boat that crossed a killer sea, and a captain who returned for the men he left behind. What makes the castaways of the Grafton different from so many shipwreck stories is not just that they survived. It is how they lived. They survived not only thanks to luck, though luck played a role. They survived thanks to structure, shared responsibility, and a refusal to let despair dictate terms. The Auckland Islands are still cold, wet, and indifferent. The Southern Ocean still kills. But for 19 months on that remote shore, 5 men built a shelter, a workshop, and finally, a boat, then steered it into the furious 50s and came out the other side. In an era that loves to imagine the past as either romantic or primitive, their achievement stands in a quieter light. Not romance, not primitive heroism, but something more unsettling and more human. Competence under pressure, reason in the face of fear, and a stubborn decision made day after day to continue building when it would have been easier to give up. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you rethink what humans are capable of under pressure, please take a moment to like the video. It really helps the channel reach more people. And if you want more true stories of survival, exploration, and the thin line between failure and triumph, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.